Yo, what's everybody? It's me, that one weep here, back with a brand new part 3 for What If Subaru Was Sukuna's Vessel. Now, if you guys are new to the channel or just have to catch up or are just, not aware of the series, then go up here to the top upper right hand corner and you'll find a playlist which has all 2 previous parts. You can just watch those 2 and then come back to this video and be all caught up. If you like this series and want to see more of it, make sure to hit that like button down here below and subscribe to my channel for more videos from me like this, as well as down other anime content. Anyway, enough of that, let's just get into this part for What If Subaru Was Sukuna's Vessel. Subaru would open his eyes. As he looks up, he would see 2 maids standing there, one with blue hair and one with pink, as they'd be holding each other's hands, watching in fear, as Subaru and Sukuna were talking to each other in their sleep, with Subaru's voice switching in between the 2 of them very commonly during the night, causing the 2 demon sisters to freak out, as Rem and Ram would watch in horror. Subaru would rub his eyes as he wakes up, wondering where he was as he looks around, before remembering the previous day, as he had been in the carriage with Amelia, and once he had arrived at the mansion, he pretty much passed out from exhaustion, just falling over into bed in the room that Amelia had told him he'd be in, and now he was here. He'd yawn as he stretches his arms into the air and says, "Good morning, I'm Subaru Natsuki, it's nice to meet you," he'd say as he smiled, closing his eyes. Ren would begin to say, sister, this man is incredibly weird." Yes, Ren would say back. "You guys know I'm right here, right?" Subaru would say, feeling a little disheartened, but at least he knew their names now, with Rem and Ram being the 2 of them. And he'd quickly pick up on some of their social cues, with Rem respecting Ram more, even though Ram was pretty much useless compared to Rem, from Subaru just watching them do chores around the mansion. Finally, lunch had arrived, and it was time for Rem and Ram to now bring Subaru to meet the master of the mansion, as well as the leader of the nearby area, this being Master Roswall. As Subaru would enter into the room, Roswell would be studying Subaru intently. He could already tell Subaru was a bit different from the other people that he had met in this world before. He was a bit odd. And of course, he would also know a few things from the Book of Wisdom, the tome of wisdom given to him by his master, but we'll get into that later. Subaru, not realizing that this was actually Roswell, would look around back and forth, seeing and try and look for some old guy in fancy clothes. Subaru would pat Roswell's back as he asks if this guy Roswell is really into clowns or something, if he liked having them like jesters at his table. Subaru would laugh as Rem and Ram would be horrified. Roswell would turn, simply saying, "Hello, it is good to meet you, for I am Roswall." Subaru would stop patting him on the back, as Subaru would realize his mistake almost immediately, as Roswell would laugh in his head, thinking this was hilarious. Sukuna would also be laughing at Subaru, and Subaru would whisper for him to shut up. "You know, Sukuna, you could have told me this if you really knew it earlier," Subaru would grit through his teeth. "What was that?" Roswell would ask. Nothing," Subaru would say quickly and nervously as he shakes his hands. Amelia would enter the room and then explain to Roswell that Subaru's weird, and he talks himself a lot. But Amelia would not mention Sukuna, who she had met personally. Roswell would then introduce himself formally, saying he is Roswall L. Mathers, and the owner of this mansion. He would thank Subaru for helping Amelia find her insignia. As Amelia's backer, it was rather important to him that she had kept track of this object. Subaru wouldn't press further, so he wouldn't really get what he meant, but basically Roswell was thanking Subaru for helping make sure that Amelia would stay in the selection for the royal selection, which Subaru has no idea is happening. Subaru would say it was really no big problem at all, saying he just wanted to help a cute girl out. Amelia would huff, obviously blowing off his comment, as Subaru would feel an arrow going into his heart. "My heart!" Subaru would feel pain. Well, heart pain, I guess you could say. Sukuna would laugh again at Amelia, saying that he liked this girl a lot more than he originally would have thought. Sukuna in his mind would be thinking that this girl has a lot of potential, as well as that weird nature spirit cat thing that he found. Sukuna would listen intently, as well as Subaru, as Roswell would then explain to them that due to their heroics, he would like to offer them a gift of sorts. If Subaru has any requests or wish that he may desire, that Roswell would be in his power to give him. Subaru would immediately answer as he does say he has one thing, as Roswal would listen watching him, his golden eyes twinkling in anticipation. Subaru would then answer as he points forward, saying he would like to get a job here at the mansion and work as a butler. You just want to get closer to that elf girl, don't you, Subaru? We've had this talk, Sukuna. Elf girls are superior than cat girls. Sukuna would click his tongue, explaining to Subaru the benefits of cat girls, saying they both function as a girlfriend and a cat, meaning if you want pets or cuddles, they can function for both, while elf girls merely possess ears that are larger. You could probably find that in a human if you really wanted to. Subaru would go into an inner argument with Sukuna again over cat versus elf girls, in which Sukuna would get rather heated, saying he's not going to help Subaru next time if he says that cat girls are inferior one more time. Subaru would stick his tongue out in his mental space in his eye as he mocks Sukuna. You little brat, Sukuna would say, as he begins running after Subaru in his mental space and tries to chase after him. Meanwhile, in the real world, Roswal would be watching as Subaru's pretty much standing there still, as after a while he would then fade back into reality, seemingly just having stopped still, and would say thank you to Roswal for accepting his request. Rem and Ra would just be watching, with Ra immediately sighing, realizing she's going to have to help train him. That means more work for her. Ugh. Rem would just be annoyed that her sister has to do even more work, since she's already incapable enough. She doesn't need another incapable person to be doing nothing around here while Ram does everything. Rem would be thinking, even though Rem literally did everything while Ram watches. But I'll digress. Immediately we get back to studying in her room for the royal selection, and this would be when Subaru's training would begin. Subaru would begin in the kitchen as he begins working on cutting potatoes. This time when he cuts his finger with the knife, as blood begins to stop out, he doesn't scream and begins freaking out. Instead, he just sighs as he covers his hand over it, telling Sukuna to heal it. As he whispers into his mind, heal it, Sukuna would tell him, only if you say cat girls are better. Really? Subaru would think, you're gonna do this right now, aren't you? Subaru would then close his eyes, seemingly daydreaming, and Ram would then slap him on the shoulder before slapping him across the face, telling him to focus. Sorry, big sis, Subaru would say. Don't call me that, it's creepy, Ram would say, narrowing her eyes like a cat. Sukuna would tell Subaru one more time, say the cat girls are better or I won't heal it. You're such a child sometimes, he would whisper to Sukuna. This is coming from you, Su? The kid in 8th grade who is so afraid of watching horror movies that you pretend like you were sick instead of going with your friends? Subaru would blush bright red in the real world as he would then yell out that he's not scared of horror movies, with Ram jumping back in fear after that sudden outburst, asking what was wrong with him. Subaru would say nothing as he turns around, realizing as he feels awkwardness spreading around him. As he tries to apologize to Ram, Ram would turn away, causing Subaru to fall over. Look what you did, Sukuna, Subaru would say. Subaru would watch in horror as Sukuna would laugh his ass off, telling Subaru he needs to be more careful. Anyhow, Subaru's finger would be healed from Sukuna being amused, as Subaru would then get back to doing the potatoes, getting more cuts, but they would heal eventually, with some of them just being left alone after Subaru had refused to acknowledge the existence of cat girls being better than elf girls, according to Sukuna, that is. This debate would continue, he would say. I'll break you eventually, Subaru, along with your body, which will become mine. Yeah, whatever you say, Sukuna, Subaru would say. As Subaru continues working, he would eventually be getting the hang of it, but he'd still be pretty bad at it since, being new and all, he had to learn the skills. Subaru would eventually be with Rem outside as he was helping with the gardening, just learning about all the different rooms in the mansion and the certain chores that came along with it. Subaru would actually be beginning to understand a bit, even with Sukuna's intervention and annoying him and causing these small outbursts, which would be happening in the mansion from different rooms. You could hear him yelling at random intervals. Subaru would be lying on the ground panting and sweating, having not done this much physical labor in a long time. Phew, finally done, Subaru would say, before Rem would walk over saying that was just their morning routine, saying they have to now fold Roswell's laundry, as well as make sure that Subaru has his butler uniform, which they would not be able to do. They'd head over to the dressing room for the butlers and maids, and would begin to dress Subaru accordingly, with Subaru actually fitting better into women's clothing, just with causing Rem to help him sew. This would be something Subaru actually could do, as he'd offer to sew them himself, but Rem would refuse, saying she'll do it and take his measurements. Subaru would then adjust, helping Rem with this part, as Rem would realize that Subaru had some talent when it came to sewing at the very least, mentioning it out loud. Subaru would thank Rem as he looks away, with Rem saying that's not that big of a compliment, you know. And also, you're nowhere near as good as Big Sister, Rem would say. Why do you do that? Subaru would ask. Huh? Rem would then ask Subaru back. Why do you always put yourself down and raise her to such high levels? To be fair, Ram still does better than me, of course, but I just got started, and from what I've seen, you're the one who does all the work around here. That's not true, Rem would say. Rem would then begin to explain to Subaru about why her sister was so much better than her, and Subaru just wouldn't get it. Rem would decide that it wasn't even worth talking to him anyway, seeing as he'll be gone soon either way. Later that night, and for the next few days, Subaru would have begun learning how to read and write, as well as continuing to get better and better at cooking, cleaning, and doing all the other chores around the mansion. With Rem and Ram both respectively helping him, Subaru would begin to feel a connection forming between the two sisters and himself, which was the first bonds that he'd made in this world besides Amelia, and Subaru thought that they were becoming friends, so he was pretty happy. Sukuna would be watching every move, as he'd begun to tell that something was off, especially with one of the girls. He wouldn't tell Subaru this, but he knew it in the back of his mind, waiting to see what would happen and in expectations. Subaru one night would go to bed after eating a big dinner, as he begins to fall asleep early after finishing some of his writing and reading by reading some Lagunica fairy tales. As he was just finished one about a witch, the Witch of Envy, he'd fall into a deep sleep. Subaru would wake up in the middle of the night with a cold sweat. As Subaru would rush to try and find the bathroom, Subaru would relieve himself, smiling, and he would then go back to bed and have a peaceful night's sleep, to Rem's surprise. In the morning, when Subaru comes down for breakfast to prepare it for Roswal and everyone else, Rem would be shocked seeing Subaru alive. That was enough poison to kill 10 men, Rem would think. And so for the first week, Rem's attempt to kill Subaru would have failed, due to Sukuna's natural ability that Subaru had inherited by having become Sukuna's vessel, since as some of you might know, Sukuna, and by extension his vessel, is completely immune to all poisons and curses, since as the king of curses, his main thing was toxins and poisons, so they don't affect him. Subaru would continue to help out around the house, doing chores, and things would have begun to fall into a routine for him, as his hands would have become more bandaged after all the cuts that he'd been using to learn how to properly cut potatoes, and just cook in general. Ram would have been pretty impressed with his progress, but Rem would be on the other hand a bit pissed off, having her first murder attempt on him completely failed. This actually confirmed her suspicions that Subaru was most likely a spy, sent to try and forsake Amelia as well as just give information to the other camps for the royal selection, or worse, go after their master Roswal. She would have decided that she must kill him at this point. And so, as the evening came, Rem would have sent Subaru out to go get some medicinal herbs from the nearby forest, as Rem herself would have gone after Subaru shortly after, about 10 minutes after Subaru had left the mansion. As Subaru was bending over picking up some herbs, suddenly his senses began to tingle as all the hairs on the back of his neck would stand up. He would hear a chain as he'd suddenly dodge out of the way, using his superhuman speed and strength given to him by cursed energy and being Sukuna's vessel to dodge it. What? Suddenly, that would be when a large metal spiked ball of a chain would come flying through and completely destroy the tree just right in front of where he had been standing. The chain would suddenly whip back as it rips through the forest. We can hear the jangling of chains as the metal grinding against metal would pierce into Subaru's ears. Subaru would be focusing, yelling out into the forest, "Who's there?" As suddenly a faster blow would come this time, right towards Subaru's leg. Subaru wouldn't have anticipated this, and so he would have taken the hit, his right leg getting completely blown off from the attack as he falls to the ground, bleeding out. Sukuna would be watching with interest, as if he was about to die he would step in immediately, but he wanted to see who the attacker was, and this was the best way. Sukuna doesn't really care about Subaru that much. He simply uses him to try and get his body, and with only 2 fingers, he didn't really feel like he had to intervene, especially since Sukuna had nothing he really wanted from this time, with the first time there being a finger that he had sensed, and also protecting the girl that he was interested in. The culmination of this would be why Subaru would be all on his own. As Subaru would try and cover the wound, this would be when we see her walking out. The blue-haired girl in the maid uniform, with blood now streaking over her hands, as the metal weapon with the pink spikes of metal in her hand would begin to fly up and down, as we see Rem with cold, heartless eyes. "Rem?" Subaru would ask. "It's you? No way." Subaru would be shocked, seeing Rem having been the one who had actually been trying to kill him. There was just no way. Why? Why is this happening? Rem would answer him, telling him that he's a spy, probably trying to hurt Roswal or Amelia's royal selection campaign. What? Subaru would say, his eyes shaking as he was shocked, having the idea in his head, this idealistic world, shattered. Suddenly another blow as Subaru's right arm would get slammed, as it twisted in the wrong way, bending as blood would spurt out from the rips in his flesh. Subaru would think. Subaru would cover the arm with cursed energy to try and null the pain, but it wouldn't do anything against Rem's pure physical strength. The next time it would be sent towards his left arm, Subaru would then try and catch it as he grabs the metal ball with both hands, feeling cuts across his hand. As Rem would try and pull the ball back, Subaru would pull back harder, as even using his superhuman strength was barely able to keep up with Rem, due to her being a demon. El Huma, Rem would use, as suddenly spikes of ice would come shooting out from Rem's hand. Magic, as it pierced into Subaru's body. Subaru would feel his limbs going cold, as suddenly Rem would fire off her attack, throwing her metal spike and chain, as it would then go rushing towards Subaru's chest, piercing him through and slamming him to the mountainside behind him. As Subaru's eyes would look hollow, as blood would begin to fall out of his body, trickling and dripping out of him from every orifice, every piece of flesh ripped apart by Rem. Sukuna would be laughing as he watches his body, the body of this brat, this cocky brat thinking he was better than everyone just because he had his power. Well, I guess I'll let you take it this time. Besides, I have 20 fingers. I, of course, probably have another person who can be my vessel. Maybe. Sometime. As Sukuna would be accepting his fate, now giving up on Subaru, allowing themselves to die, Subaru would begin to fall unconscious, seeing Rem as she was about to finish him off for one last time, covered in his blood. Black hands would begin to surround Subaru's neck, throat, and body, as Sukuna would open his eyes again, shocked, as he sees that woman daring to touch his soul. You bitch! Don't touch my... Subaru would be shocked as he opens his eyes. We see Sukuna inside of Subaru's body, simply looking around as he's just relaxing, waking up as he rubs his eyes. As Subaru opens his eyes looking around, he would see two girls, one with red, pinkish hair and one with blue and maid outfits, standing in front of him in fear as they had heard him screaming, as well as him talking to himself in two voices. Subaru would be shocked in a cold sweat as he screamed when he first woke up. Subaru would realize as he looks down at his hands that he'd reset. He'd reset all the way back to almost 2 weeks ago when he'd first arrived at the mansion. He had gone back in time. Sukuna, did you see that when Rem killed us? Why didn't you help me for one, you asshole, Subaru would say. Sukuna would look up asking what he's calling him an asshole for. Nothing happened, we just got here last night. That's one way to talk to someone who saved your ass from that one girl, the freak with the knife the other day. Subaru would have no idea what's going on, as this would be his first ever experience returning by death. If you guys like this part of What If Subaru was Sukuna's vessel, make sure to hit the like button, comment down below what you think, and subscribe to my channel for more videos from me. Do you guys like that Sukuna and Subaru's souls are different? Meaning that whenever Subaru resets, Sukuna actually doesn't have memories of the previous timeline, which is probably going to cause a lot of problems in the future between Sukuna and Subaru with the different memories that they'd both be having, since Sukuna can actually access Subaru's memories and mental state, meaning that they're basically going to have two different sets of events. Anyway, that's pretty much it for today. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.